I discovered my wife's chat with her AP about how great they hooked up, so I exposed him to his wife and now she's begging me to stay. Hey Reddit, marriage is supposed to be built on trust, or at least that's what I believed. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 7 years. We weren't perfect, but I thought we had something real, a partnership where we could weather any storm. But all of that came crashing down a few weeks ago. For the past couple of months, I noticed some subtle changes in Emily. She had become distant, distracted, and a little too secretive about her phone. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She'd recently taken on a big project at work, and I figured she was just overwhelmed. But then, there were little red flags that I couldn't ignore. She started keeping her phone on her at all times, even when it made no sense. For instance, she would bring it into the bathroom when she took a shower, something she never used to do. At night, her phone would be on Do Not Disturb, even though she used to keep it open for emergency calls. And then there were the work meetings that ran unusually late. I wanted to believe her, but my gut told me something wasn't right. One morning, Emily left her phone on the kitchen counter while she hopped in the shower. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to check. I'm not proud of it. It felt like a massive invasion of privacy, but at that moment, I needed answers. What I found made my heart sink. She had been texting a guy named Jake, someone I didn't recognize. The texts weren't just flirty, they were explicit. They talked about how incredible their recent hookup was, how much they missed each other, and how they couldn't wait to be together again. My stomach churned when I read the part where she compared him to me, saying he made her feel alive in ways I never could. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen. It felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. This was my wife, the person I trusted most in the world, and she was out there betraying me in the worst way imaginable. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. My mind was racing, and I needed time to process what I'd just seen. I also wanted to gather more evidence. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to her behavior and even snooped through her phone again when I got the chance. I found more texts, more proof that this wasn't just a fling, it was an ongoing affair. Then, I discovered Jake was married. His wife, Sarah, was completely unaware of what was happening. That's when my anger turned into something more focused. If Emily and Jake thought they could destroy 2 marriages and walk away unscathed, they had another thing coming. I decided to reach out to Sarah. It was a difficult decision, I didn't want to hurt her, but I felt she deserved to know the truth. I sent her a message, explaining who I was and why I was contacting her. When I shared the screenshots of the texts, she called me immediately. She was sobbing, saying she had no idea her husband was capable of something like this. Sarah and I ended up meeting in person to talk. We shared our stories, our heartbreak, and our anger. It was strangely comforting to know I wasn't alone in this mess, though I hated the circumstances that brought us together. Sarah told me she had suspected something for a while but never had any concrete proof until now. We decided to confront them together. That evening, Sarah called Jake and told him to come home early. I texted Emily, saying we needed to talk. When Emily walked into our living room and saw Sarah sitting there with me, her face went pale. She started crying before I even said a word. Jake showed up a few minutes later, looking confused. When he saw me, Emily, and Sarah together, he tried to play dumb. I didn't even need to say much. I just pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots. The look on his face was priceless and pure panic. And Emily kept saying, "Please, I can explain," over and over, but I didn't want to hear it. Sarah was much more direct. She told Jake to pack his things and leave. She was done. After the confrontation, I left. I couldn't be in the same space as Emily. I didn't know what I wanted or how to move forward, but I knew I needed space. Over the next few days, Emily bombarded me with messages, begging me to come home. She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she loved me, and that she was willing to do whatever it took to fix things. She even started going to therapy on her own and wrote me a long letter apologizing for everything. In the letter, she tried to explain why she did it, saying she felt neglected and unappreciated. But to me, it just sounded like excuses. If she had problems with our marriage, why didn't she talk to me? Why did she turn to someone else instead? As for Jake and Sarah, they're officially done. Sarah filed for divorce almost immediately. She's a strong woman, and I admire her for taking decisive action. We've stayed in touch, mostly as a support system for each other. It helps to have someone who truly understands what I'm going through. Right now, I'm living separately from Emily and trying to figure out what I want. I haven't decided whether I can forgive her or if I even want to. Trust is a fragile thing, and once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Could you forgive a betrayal like this, or is it better to cut your losses and move on? Update. After the confrontation, I moved out of the house and stayed with a close friend. I didn't want to be around Emily, and honestly, I needed time to think. I felt like I was walking through a fog, replaying everything over and over in my mind. How could she do this? Why didn't I see the signs earlier? Every little detail from the past few months suddenly made sense: the late nights, the secretive behavior, the unexplained distance between us. Emily didn't give me much space, though. She started texting and calling constantly. Her messages were full of apologies, promises, and desperate pleas to talk. She claimed she made a mistake, that she was overwhelmed by feelings she didn't understand, and that it had nothing to do with me or our marriage. I didn't believe her. How could I? I decided to take a week off work to clear my head. During that time, I did a lot of reflecting. I read articles and watched videos about infidelity, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. It helped, but only a little. The betrayal was still fresh, and the pain felt unbearable. I also reached out to Sarah during this time. We had a long phone call where we talked about how our spouse's affair had affected us. Sarah told me she confronted Jake again after our meeting and demanded the truth. He admitted everything but tried to downplay it, saying it was just a physical fling that didn't mean anything. Sarah didn't buy it and filed for divorce. Hearing her resolve inspired me, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that step yet. Emily eventually convinced me to meet her in person. She wanted to explain, and while I wasn't sure if I could handle hearing her excuses, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop, and she was a mess, crying, apologizing, begging me to come home. She admitted she had feelings for Jake but claimed she never stopped loving me. She said she was willing to do whatever it took to fix our marriage, including going to counseling. I told her I needed more time to think. I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. Another update. After our meeting, Emily started therapy. She said she wanted to work on herself and understand why she made the choices she did. I'll admit, it sounded like a step in the right direction. She even suggested we try couples therapy if I was willing. But I still had doubts. Something about her sudden eagerness to fix things felt insincere, like she was trying to sweep everything under the rug. A week later, I decided to dig deeper into her affair. I already had the texts I found on her phone, but I wondered if there was more she hadn't told me. I went through her emails and social media accounts again, something I'm not proud of, but I needed to know the full truth. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Their relationship wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. Emily had been venting to Jake about our marriage, telling him things I never even knew she felt. She complained about me not being romantic enough, not making her feel special, and not appreciating her. It hurt to read those messages, especially because I thought I was doing my best as a husband. When I confronted Emily about the emotional side of their affair, she broke down again. She admitted she felt unfulfilled in our marriage but said she never intended to fall for Jake. She claims she got caught up in the excitement and didn't know how to stop. Hearing that just made me angrier. If she had problems with our relationship, why didn't she talk to me? Why turn to someone else? At this point, I told her I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive her. She begged me not to give up on us, saying she was willing to fight for our marriage. But I wasn't sure if I had the energy to fight anymore. Update 3. As the weeks passed, Sarah and I continued talking regularly. We weren't just venting anymore, we were sharing more about our lives, our dreams, and what we wanted moving forward. It was comforting to talk to someone who truly understood my pain, but it also made me realize how much I'd been missing in my marriage: honest communication and emotional support. Emily, on the other hand, was relentless in her attempts to win me back. She started therapy and sent me long letters explaining how she was working on herself. One evening, she showed up at my friend's house with a photo album of our happiest moments, pleading for another chance. Her tears felt genuine, but her actions still seemed more like desperation than real growth. To make matters worse, she began reaching out to my family, trying to get them to convince me to come home. My mom called to say Emily was heartbroken and begged me to hear her out. It felt manipulative, and I was growing more distant with every attempt she made. One night, I shared my frustrations with Sarah, and she said something that resonated deeply: sometimes people fight for the relationship not out of love, but out of fear of losing what they have. That made me question everything. Was Emily truly sorry, or was she just scared of facing the consequences of her actions? At the same time, my bond with Sarah was growing. I wasn't sure what it meant, but I knew one thing: she made me feel understood in a way I hadn't felt in years. Now, I'm torn between giving Emily another chance and choosing a fresh start. This decision feels heavier with each passing day. Update 4. As the weeks went by, I started feeling the pressure to make a decision. Emily was relentless in her attempts to reconcile, but I was growing more distant. I couldn't get past the betrayal, the lies, and the fact that she turned to someone else instead of coming to me. I met with a divorce lawyer to discuss my options. It wasn't an easy step to take, but I needed to know what my future could look like if I decided to end the marriage. The lawyer was understanding and explained everything clearly, but the reality of it all hit me hard. This wasn't just about ending a relationship, it was about dismantling a life we built together. Emily found out I spoke to a lawyer and had another meltdown. She begged me to give her a chance to prove she could change. She even suggested we move to a new city and start fresh, as if running away from the problem would fix everything. I told her I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. At the same time, my bond with Sarah grew stronger. We started meeting in person more often, just as friends. But I couldn't ignore the comfort I felt around her. It made me question what I truly wanted in a partner and whether Emily could ever give me that again. Now, I'm standing at a crossroads. Part of me wants to believe Emily can change and that our marriage is worth saving. But another part of me feels like the damage is too great to repair. As for Sarah, I don't know where our friendship will lead, but I'm grateful to have her in my corner. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Could you ever forgive a betrayal like this, or is it better to let go and start over?